All right, the topic today is going to be the Iranian Revolution. And Iran is a country, as of late, where there's been a lot of conversation about how it interacts with the United States. There was a point we were thinking maybe in 2020, 2019, where we could have gone to war with Iran. So what we're going to start to do now is we're going to start to look at how Iran transitioned from a pro-United States country to being a violent, not violent, but a regime that does not like the United States. So let me get to the actual lecture here. Pull up the video. It's been a while since I've made one, so. All right, Iran. So last time we were looking at Cambodia in the 1970s. Now we're taking a look at a major change that happens in the country of Iran. Right? Iran has been located in the Middle East, next to Iraq, near Saudi Arabia, the gateway to Asia as well. So we'll look at the 1979 revolution and how it changed everything in terms of our connection to the United States and Iran. So let's look at the history of this one. All right. First of all, Iran, it's a big thing. Religion is huge in this area. And most of the people that are living in Iran are Shia Muslims. And it goes all the way back to that split over the Prophet Muhammad between the Sunni and the Shia. Shia are the minority. It's rare to find them. But in Iran, they are the majority. All right. So it's a Shia Muslim country. And that plays out even today. There are so many events happening in the Middle East where there's this nasty tension between Sunni and Shia Muslims. It's happening in Syria, it's happening in Yemen, it's happening in Saudi Arabia. These two sides don't like each other, so that's a big thing to understand. Iran is a predominantly Shia Muslim country, and it does not like Sunni Muslim countries. So 1943, World War II, Churchill, FDR, and Stalin guarantees post-World War II independence. So they want to give Iran back to the people of Iran itself. At this point, it's basically under rule and jurisdiction of the British. And after World War II, these big, powerful countries are saying, all right, this is decolonization, you get your country back. So they have a leader who's in place. He's actually overthrown by us, the United States. We have a covert option, and we overthrow the first leader of this new independent Iran because we want access to oil. All right. First guy wasn't going to let Americans, in essence, export, get the import of oil from Iran. So we overthrew the first guy who was set up there. And we put this guy in place, the Shah of Iran. He's basically a puppet for the United States. He's put in power. He's going to like us. We'll give him a lot of funding. We'll also give him nuclear abilities. That's why Iran this day is on the brink of a nuclear arsenal, because we gave them the first nuclear plants, nuclear power. So that's the history. Predominantly Shia Muslim country. It gains its independence after World War II. America does not like the new guy, so we basically have a revolution to install the Shah of Iran, who's going to give us oil. And we in return give them nuclear power. That's the trade-off. So let's look at the Shah. All right, the Shah is a close ally of the United States for nearly 3 decades, from the 50s right to about 1979. All right, so he's 30 years of power. And during this time, Iran is very pro-West. Remember, this area of the world has had religion and government linked for a long time, and this guy, he doesn't have that. Religion and government are separate. That's something that's very American, very Western European, and you find that under his rule. Religion and government are separate. But he himself is an autocrat. When we say an autocrat, it means he has absolute power. It's uncontested. That's why he's going to rule for almost 30 years. Here in America, we have this democratic process where you get new leaders every 4 years or 6 years, depending on when you vote. For who you're electing, but autocrats keep power. And America didn't care. As long as it got a steady flow of oil, America could care less. And because we cared less, this guy who's an autocrat has a secret police. There's sweeping arrests against his critics. You did not speak up against the Shah. But as long as America was getting oil, we didn't care. So that's the weird setup here between the United States and Iran. At this point, they like each other. We are liking the Iranian oil that's flowing in the United States and helping our economy. And the things that are happening in Iran, America could really not care. You have this interesting Shah, who's very much a dictator, who's an autocrat, ruling with absolute power. But he likes America. All right. And during this time frame, what you see is a recipe for disaster and evolution. Whenever you have when the rich become extremely rich, and the poor, when the middle class moves to poverty, that is when you have actual tension between different groups. All right, and that is what's happening in the 30 years of the Shah's reign. All right, so by the 70s, there's this boiling tension against the Shah, and it's going to be this guy, the Ayatollah Khomeini. The Ayatollah, he's the most outspoken critic of the Shah, and what he really is, he's a religious leader, and religion is powerful to people. I mean, it's powerful even to this day. You don't talk about politics, you don't talk about money, and you don't talk about religion. And this guy is a powerful religious leader for the people, for the poor, the middle class, and he's promising economic reform. And he said he wants to turn Iran back to its old traditional values, where religion is more important than government. Okay? And that appeals to many in Iran because the current guy, the current leader, the Shah, is twisted. He has a secret police. He's got absolute power. And here's this outspoken religious critic saying, we're going to turn this country back around. We'll put the right priorities back in place. We'll use religion to guide us. And to people who are practicing Muslims, that sounds like a better plan. And just kicking out the former leader sounds like a good idea as well. So there's a revolt. All right, 1963, the Ayatollah's arrested for making negative remarks against the Shah. He's arrested in the 1960s. And because he's arrested by the leader of Iran, riots break out. There's massive riots. They don't like this religious leader being jailed. Riots break out, hundreds are jailed, and the Ayatollah himself is arrested. He's jailed and found guilty, and they send him off to France for 15 years. They can't kill him. Kill him would cause too much unrest. You might have even more unrest. But if you simply kick this individual out, perhaps you can make him disappear. So you think this would be the end of the story of the Ayatollah, this religious reformer, but it's not. All right, so that's what happens. So the Shah keeps power, and this guy, who is a religious leader talking change, is sent to France for 15 years. All right, so this is not the day of the internet and Instagrams and YouTube's getting a message out, but let's look at what the Ayatollah does to keep in connection with Iran. All right, so we move ahead forward when we're late 70s now. The Shah, who's been in power since the 50s, is worth billions, while people from Iran are facing inflation, they're facing high employment. Things are not going well by the 70s. All right, there's this anti-American, even Soviet feeling. So people in Iran just don't like anyone from the outside. They don't like Americans. They don't like the Soviets are trying to meddle. They don't like anyone. Perhaps rightly so. So the Ayatollah has been stuck in France for almost 15 years. All right, and then finally he's let go. He can leave France, but he can't go back to Iran. So he goes to the next closest country. He goes to Iraq, and when he starts doing it, he starts making these tapes. The tapes, like if you know what this thing is here, this is a cassette tape. You record yourself on a cassette tape. And he makes tapes, and he's calling for revolution again. And they're taking these tapes, which are made in Iraq, shipping them into Iran, and they're giving them to the people to listen, to be heard. And people are like, oh, he's coming back. This exiled leader is going to come back, and he's going to save us from the Shah. So the Ayatollah is making his comeback. Okay? He's going to come. He alleges he's going to come back, even though he's stuck in Iraq. He's just flooding the country with these tapes against the Shah. All right. So in these tapes, he's calling Muslims to reject liberalism, the ideas of the West, to get rid of capitalism, the ideas of the West, even communism, the ideas of the Soviet Union, and to embrace the second revolution in the name of religion. That is powerful for people. All right. So nothing too crazy here. The country goes into pure chaos. People are unemployed. Massive unemployment in the 70s. There's protests against the Shah again. It gets so bad to have to declare martial law, shut down the government, basically gives power to the military to take control of the country. And they do it during the holy month of Ramadan. And that would be like the equivalent for Christians, the canceling of Christmas. So Muslims are outraged that the government shuts down their religion, the holy month of Ramadan, in this civil unrest and martial law. And so not good. Some believe that the military might take control. Some people think the Shah would continue to keep control. It's just chaos inside Iran. because no one knows what's going to happen. Right? Some believe the Shah would keep power. No one knows what's going to happen inside the country. It's shaking itself apart. All right, so let's look at this. The departure of the Shah, the guy who's had control of Iran for 30 years. All right. So in 1979, the Shah probably sees the writing is on the wall. There's so many riots breaking out, and he goes to the United States for cancer treatment. All right, took an extended vacation. So the man who's been in power for 30 years, seeing everything happening around him, decided to make a medical vacation to go to the United States for cancer treatment. And he did have cancer, but most historians look at this event as it was a really smart move because his country was breaking apart. He may have easily been killed if the riots got out of control. So he leaves for a long duration of time in 1979. All right. So when he leaves, there's even further unrest. Your leader's gone. You can't. This is the day and age where you can't easily communicate back and forth when your leader is out of the country. So Khomeini supporters tear down statues of the Shah in Iran, and no one knows like what is going to happen to the country. The leader has left. Probably a smart move by the leader. So, and then on February 1st, 1979, so not even a month later, the Ayatollah is back. He comes back to Iran 15 years after his exile, and he is back in the country. And you see the flock of people moving to him. He kind of takes over. It's a default leadership change when he's allowed back in because no one stops him this time. Crazy. So street battles break out between the Khomeini's demonstrators, police, the Shah supporters. So you got three different warring sides. This group's followers, the police are just trying to do their job, and you've got the Shah supporters, individuals and citizens. So you've got this weird civil war happening in Iran itself. All right. So you're in pretty good shape. Don't worry about this. All right. So hold on, let me get there. The Shah never comes back. And what they decide to do is they decide to use an election to decide who's going to control Iran. In the election, you've got the Shah or you've got the Ayatollah Khomeini. That's your two options. And the Ayatollah is elected the leader. And as soon as he is elected a leader, he declares Iran an Islamic republic. So religion and government that used to be like this in Iran are now joined together. And it's been that way ever since. It's a Shia Muslim dominated country. The religion rules the politics. And then the weird thing is the Ayatollah appoints himself Iran's political and religious leader for life. I mean, the last guy was in charge and he was an autocrat for 30 years. Now the Ayatollah is a political leader and a religious leader until he dies. So there's this transition once again, but this is when everything changes. Iran becomes a theocracy again. It does not like the United States, and this is how it, like, politics and geopolitical situations have emerged ever since. This is when Iran changed, when the Ayatollah Khomeini comes to power. All right. When you're sophomores, you'll get the story of the hostage crisis between the United States and Iran. But this is just critical to understand this is how it all happened. 1979, this is the change where Iran goes from being a pro-American country to hating everything about us. And it all changes here with Ayatollah. All right, that was your lecture. You're all set. Feel free to review as you want.